When Keanu Reeves walked away, Sandra Bullock's reaction left the world speechless. The evening had a strange stillness, like the calm before a storm. In a grand hall filled with laughter, flashing cameras, and the low murmur of Hollywood's elite, Keanu Reeves stood quietly near the corner. He had always been the man who preferred the shadows to the spotlight, who chose silence over noise and sincerity over performance. But tonight was different. Tonight, he felt the weight of eyes pressing against him, and for the first time in years he wasn't sure if he belonged there. Sandra Bullock arrived moments later. She had the kind of smile that lit up an entire room. A smile that masked exhaustion, a smile that the world had come to adore. But behind her grace, she too was carrying the invisible burden of expectation. When her eyes met Keanu's across the room, something unspoken passed between them. A familiarity, a history, and a truth that only they understood. They had walked through life stages together before, shared laughter on sets, quiet confessions behind the curtains, and long years of friendship built on respect. But the bond they shared was more than the world could ever label. It was deeper, more fragile, and harder to explain. The event went on with speeches and music, but Keanu's mind was elsewhere. People praised him, called him humble, called him one of the kindest men in Hollywood. Yet those words never settled in his heart. He carried his past like a shadow, loss, grief, and years of walking alone. And tonight, that shadow felt heavier than ever. During the charity auction, he smiled faintly and signed the check that everyone would later praise him for. But his heart wasn't in it. He glanced at Sandra, who was laughing politely at someone's joke, but her eyes betrayed her. She looked tired, almost broken beneath the sparkle. And then it happened. A reporter, bold and sharp, raised his voice over the crowd. "Keanu, everyone wants to know. What's really going on between you and Sandra? Are you finally going to admit what the world has suspected for years?" The room froze. Sandra's smile faltered. All eyes turned to him. Keanu's chest tightened. In that moment, he felt trapped between truth and silence, between the pressure of expectation and the sanctuary of his private soul. He glanced at Sandra, saw the fear flicker across her face, and made a choice that no one expected. He set down his glass, gave a small nod, and quietly walked away. The room erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed wildly. Whispers spread like fire, and questions filled the air. Sandra remained frozen, staring at the space where he had stood. Her heart raced. Her throat tightened. And though she tried to hold her composure, her body trembled. People thought she would laugh it off, that she would dismiss the scene with her usual grace. But instead, Sandra did something no one predicted. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Sometimes walking away isn't weakness," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Sometimes it's the only way to keep something pure, something too precious for this noise." The hall fell silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Her words cut through the glitter and the gossip, through the hunger for headlines. Her reaction left everyone speechless because it revealed more than a denial or a confession ever could. Backstage, Sandra found herself alone, her hands shaking. Keanu was nowhere in sight. She leaned against the wall, tears spilling freely now, whispering to herself, "Why did you have to walk away tonight?" What she didn't know was that Keanu, outside in the night air, was whispering almost the same words. He looked up at the stars and said softly, "I had to, Sandra, because I couldn't let them take this from us. Their choices, their silence, and their unspoken truth had just set the stage for a story the world would never forget. And this was only the beginning." The night after the event was restless for both of them. Sandra tossed in bed, unable to push away the memory of Keanu's quiet exit. She kept replaying the moment. His calm face, his steady walk toward the door, the way he refused to look back. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, something she couldn't yet name. Across the city, Keanu sat alone in his dimly lit apartment. A single lamp cast soft shadows on the walls. He stared at the untouched cup of tea in his hands, his thoughts heavy. He hated the spotlight, hated the way people twisted what was sacred. But most of all, he hated that his choice to walk away had left Sandra vulnerable. He could still see her face when the question was asked, the flicker of fear, the weight of silence. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Keanu Reeves storms out, Sandra Bullock left stunned. Are they hiding something? Hollywood's most private friendship finally cracks? Sandra's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, from her team, even from strangers who thought they understood. But the one message she longed for never came. Keanu hadn't reached out. Finally, unable to carry it any longer, she called him. The line rang once, twice, and then his voice, low and steady, filled her ear. Sandra. Her throat tightened. Keanu, why? Why did you leave me there like that? His silence stretched before he answered. Because if I had stayed, they would have pushed until I broke. And if I broke, it wouldn't have been truth they printed. It would have been their version of it. I couldn't let them turn what we have into noise. Her eyes filled with tears. But you walking away, it felt like you were walking away from me. His voice softened. Never from you. Only from them. The words hit her chest like a wave. She wanted to be angry, but instead she felt the raw honesty of his choice. Days later, the two were scheduled to appear at the same charity fundraiser. Sandra dreaded it, knowing the questions would be louder this time. When she arrived, the room buzzed immediately. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered. Eyes followed her every step. And then Keanu entered. The room shifted again. People waited for tension, for distance, for cracks in the foundation of their bond. Instead, Keanu walked directly toward her. He stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable, his presence steady. The room went silent, everyone holding their breath. Are you all right? He asked, his voice low, meant only for her. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. I am now. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them was heavy with everything unspoken. Then, in front of the entire crowd, Keanu offered her his hand. She hesitated only a second before placing hers in his. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked furiously, but they didn't flinch. Together they walked forward, not explaining, not justifying, just existing side by side. Sandra felt her pulse race, but she also felt a strange calm. His hand was warm, grounding. His silence was louder than any words, and in that silence she realized something. He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her, protecting them. Later that night, when they slipped away from the crowd, Sandra finally asked, Keanu, how long can we keep this up? The hiding, the silence. He looked at her with eyes that carried years of pain and resilience. As long as it takes. Until the world is ready to understand, or until we stop caring if they do. Her chest tightened. And what if I'm already tired of hiding? He paused, his gaze steady. Then we face it together, no matter what comes. For the first time since that night he walked away, Sandra felt a spark of hope. But deep inside, she also knew the storm was only beginning. The world had seen too much, and it would not let go so easily. What neither of them realized was that the next test would not come from the outside world. It would come from within, forcing them to confront feelings they had both tried to bury for years. And when that moment came, it would change everything. The charity event had calmed the noise for a brief moment, but behind closed doors, a new silence grew heavier between them. They had walked hand in hand before the crowd, and though the world saw strength, both Keanu and Sandra carried questions that haunted them long after the lights faded. Sandra lay awake that night, staring at her ceiling. Her heart replayed every second, his steady hand, his calm words, his quiet strength. She wanted to believe it was only friendship, but deep down she knew it was more. The problem wasn't what she felt. It was the fear of what would happen if she admitted it. Across the city, Keanu sat by his window, the night sky stretching endlessly above him. He thought about her, about the years of laughter and comfort, about how she had always been there when he needed someone to remind him of joy. But now he felt something shifting, something dangerous. He had lost too much in his life, and the thought of risking this bond terrified him. The following week, Sandra invited him to her home. She didn't want cameras, didn't want noise, just truth. When he arrived, she greeted him quietly. No smile this time, just raw honesty in her eyes. Keanu, we can't keep pretending. What are we doing? She asked, her voice trembling. He paused, his expression unreadable. We're protecting each other. She shook her head. No, we're hiding. And I don't know if hiding is enough anymore. His chest tightened. If we give them more, they'll tear it apart. You know how they are. They'll twist it until it's unrecognizable. Her tears threatened to spill. But what about us? Are we twisting ourselves by staying silent? The words hung heavy between them. Keanu took a deep breath. Sandra, I've walked away from many things in my life. Sometimes because I had no choice. Sometimes because I thought it was the only way to survive. But with you, I don't want to walk away. I just don't know if I'm strong enough to stay. Her tears finally fell. She whispered, then maybe it's my turn to be strong for both of us. The conversation ended not with answers, but with silence. They sat side by side on her couch, the space between them thick with unspoken truths. In the days that followed, the world only grew louder. Rumors exploded online. Fan theories filled social media and talk shows debated their every move. But the real storm wasn't outside, it was inside their hearts. One evening, Sandra was invited to a late-night show. She knew the question would come, and it did. The host leaned forward with a smile that barely hid his hunger for drama. "So Sandra, the world saw you and Keanu walking hand in hand. Should we prepare for a wedding announcement?" The audience laughed, but Sandra didn't. She looked down for a moment, then raised her eyes, her voice soft but steady. What the world saw wasn't a performance. It wasn't a game. It was two people standing together when it mattered. "I don't know what label you want to put on it, but I know it's real." The audience went silent, then erupted into applause. Backstage, her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. A message from Keanu was waiting. "I saw. You were brave. Maybe braver than me," she typed quickly, her heart pounding. "Then stop walking away from what's real." For a long moment there was no reply. Then finally his words appeared. "I don't want to walk away anymore." Her breath caught, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't a confession of love, not yet, but it was the first step toward a truth they could no longer hide. Neither of them knew that the next challenge would push them further than they imagined, because soon the choice wouldn't be between silence and truth. It would be between risking everything and losing everything. And when that moment came, the world would once again fall silent at Sandra's reaction. The late-night interview became a spark that lit a wildfire. Clips of Sandra's quiet words spread everywhere, shared across social media, replayed on television, dissected by magazines. People called it raw, honest, and fearless. Others called it a confession. But to Sandra, it wasn't about headlines. It was about finally speaking a piece of her truth. Keanu watched the chaos unfold from his home. Every news anchor seemed to have an opinion. Every fan group seemed to be shouting louder than the next. Yet in the middle of all the noise, one thing kept repeating in his mind: "Stop walking away." Those were Sandra's words to him, and he couldn't escape them. A week later, they were both invited to a film tribute honoring their early work together. The event was supposed to be a celebration of cinema, but the organizers knew exactly what the audience was waiting for. The red carpet was packed tighter than ever, cameras ready to catch every glance, every step, every unspoken moment between them. Sandra arrived first, dressed elegantly but with a nervous smile that barely masked her unease. Reporters shouted her name, asking about Keanu, pressing for a confession. She stayed calm, answering with grace but offering nothing more. Then Keanu arrived. The crowd erupted, the flashbulbs blinding, the questions growing louder. When he saw Sandra at the end of the carpet, something inside him shifted. His steps slowed, his chest tightened, and the memory of every time he had walked away came crashing back. The world expected distance. The world expected silence. But instead, Keanu made a choice. He walked directly to Sandra, ignoring the shouts, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the chaos. When he reached her, the noise grew deafening, but his voice was calm, meant only for her. "You said I should stop walking away. Tonight I'm listening." Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. For a moment she forgot the cameras, forgot the world. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice breaking. Without hesitation, he offered his arm. She took it, and together they walked the carpet. Not as two people hiding, not as two actors playing roles, but as two souls choosing to face the storm together. The crowd roared. The flashes intensified, but inside that moment there was peace. Sandra felt her fear dissolve as his steady presence grounded her. Keanu, usually so private, so guarded, felt strangely free. Inside the theater, as the tribute began, they sat side by side. Speeches were made. Old film clips played. The audience laughed and cheered. But what people noticed most wasn't on the screen. It was the way Sandra leaned slightly toward Keanu, and the way his hand rested gently over hers. After the event, backstage, Sandra finally let her emotions spill. "You have no idea what tonight meant to me. You didn't walk away." He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "I realized something, Sandra. Walking away doesn't protect anything. It only leaves people wondering if you were ever really there. I don't want you to wonder anymore." Her tears fell freely as she whispered, "And what if this ruins us? What if the world twists everything?" His hand tightened gently around hers, then let them twist. "We'll hold the truth between us, and that's stronger than any headline." Her heart broke and healed at the same time. She finally understood that his silence, his distance, his walking away, it had never been about not caring. It had always been about protecting something he thought was too fragile to survive the world, but now he was ready to fight for it. What neither of them knew was that the next test would not come from the crowd or the cameras. It would come from a moment of vulnerability so raw that it would shake them both to their core. And when that moment arrived, Sandra's reaction would once again leave the world speechless. The tribute night gave the world enough to talk about for weeks. Photos of them walking arm in arm flooded every corner of the internet. Fans cheered, critics speculated, and tabloids shouted headlines that blurred the line between truth and fantasy. But behind all of that noise, a quieter story was unfolding, one that only Keanu and Sandra knew. The night after the event, Sandra found herself sitting alone in her kitchen, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Her heart was heavy, not from regret, but from the weight of all that was left unsaid. She thought of his words, "Walking away doesn't protect anything," and felt a shift inside her. She picked up her phone, typed a message, and hesitated before pressing send. Finally, she whispered aloud, "Be brave," and hit the button. Her message was short. "Come over. I don't want silence tonight." Keanu arrived an hour later, dressed simply, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. He stepped inside quietly, his presence calm but charged with something different, something unspoken. They sat across from each other at her dining table, mugs of tea between them, steam rising into the dim light. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Sandra broke the silence. "Keanu, I need to ask you something, and I don't want you to walk away from it." He nodded slowly. "Ask." Her hands trembled as she set her mug down. "Why me? Why are you always there for me even when it hurts you? Why do you protect me like this?" His gaze lowered for a moment, his jaw tightening. Then he looked into her eyes, his voice low but steady. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. And I can't bear the thought of losing you, not even to silence." Her breath caught. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything he had ever said. She whispered, "So what are we to each other, Keanu? Friends? Something more?" His silence was telling. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The warmth of his touch spoke louder than words. Finally, he said, "You've always been more, Sandra. I just never thought I deserved to say it out loud." Tears welled in her eyes. "You deserve happiness, Keanu. You always have." The room fell into a fragile quiet. Then, as if the universe wanted to test their truth, Sandra's phone buzzed. It was a notification. Her interview clip had just crossed millions of views. Social media was ablaze, filled with people dissecting every detail of her words, every look between her and Keanu. She looked at the screen, then back at him. "The whole world is watching us, Keanu. If we choose this, we're not choosing it alone. We're choosing it in front of everyone." He exhaled slowly, his thumb brushing against her hand. "Then let them watch. Because for once I don't want to walk away from what's real." Her tears spilled over, but she smiled through them. "Then don't stay." He didn't answer with words. He simply stayed, his hand never leaving hers. That night, they didn't make grand declarations. They didn't rush into labels or promises. Instead, they chose honesty. They chose presence. They chose not to walk away. But the world outside was relentless. The next morning, photos of Keanu leaving her house surfaced online. The headlines were merciless. Love confirmed? Sandra and Keanu finally together? What were they hiding all these years? For the first time, Sandra didn't panic. She faced the cameras outside her home with a calm expression, her voice steady. "Sometimes life gives you someone who makes the silence bearable. And when you find that, you don't let go." The world went silent at her words. And Keanu, watching from his apartment, whispered softly to himself, "She's braver than me, but maybe it's time I finally show her I can be brave too." What happened next would be the moment the world had waited for, the moment when Keanu Reeves, the man who always walked away, finally chose to stay. The days after the photos leaked were a storm. Paparazzi camped outside their homes. Headlines twisted every move, and television hosts debated their silence as if it were a mystery to solve. But in the middle of the chaos, something had shifted. Neither Sandra nor Keanu were running anymore. Keanu felt it deep inside. For years, he had walked away whenever the world tried to invade his private truth. But now, after Sandra's brave words and her refusal to let fear control her, he knew it was time for him to stop hiding. A week later, they were both invited to a humanitarian award ceremony. The organizers promised it would be a respectful evening, but both knew the eyes of the world would be on them again. The hall shimmered with golden lights, the atmosphere polished and grand. Sandra arrived first, her smile soft but unshaken, her presence graceful. Moments later, Keanu entered. The crowd erupted into cheers, flashes of cameras filling the room like fireworks. The evening moved forward with speeches and tributes, and then near the end the host stepped forward. Tonight we honor not just the talent of our guests, but the way they inspire through kindness and humility. Please welcome Keanu Reeves to the stage. The applause thundered. Keanu walked slowly to the microphone, his face calm, his eyes carrying the same quiet depth the world had always admired. But tonight his words would be different. Tonight he would not walk away. He adjusted the microphone. The crowd hushed. "Thank you," he began softly. "I've never been good at standing in front of people and giving speeches. I've always preferred to let my work or my silence speak for me. But tonight feels different, because silence can sometimes protect, but it can also hurt. And I don't want my silence to hurt someone who matters to me." The room stilled. Sandra's breath caught in her chest. Keanu continued, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "The truth is, I walked away before because I thought it was the only way to protect something precious. But what I've learned is that walking away doesn't protect. It only leaves behind questions, doubt, and pain. So tonight, I'm not walking away. Tonight I'm saying what should have been said long ago. Sandra, you are one of the most important people in my life. You've been my friend, my strength, and my light. And whatever the world says, whatever they twist, I want you to know this. I am here. I am staying." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed wildly. But in the middle of it all, Sandra rose to her feet, her eyes brimming with tears. She didn't hesitate, didn't hide. She walked straight to the stage. When she reached him, she didn't speak at first. She simply took his hand, her fingers trembling, her face wet with tears. The crowd held its breath. Finally, her voice broke through the silence. "The world always wondered what we were. Tonight, they got their answer. We're not a rumor. We're not a headline. We're just two people who finally stopped being afraid to stand together." The room erupted into applause, louder and longer than anyone could remember. People stood clapping, some even crying. The moment spread across the globe within hours. Millions watched the video, and for once the headlines weren't mocking or cruel. They called it brave. They called it pure. They called it love. Backstage, when the noise had finally dimmed, Sandra turned to Keanu, her tears still falling but her smile brighter than ever. "You didn't walk away this time." He squeezed her hand gently, his voice soft. "I never will again." And with those words, the story that began with silence, fear, and walking away ended with a vow that left the world speechless. A vow not written in headlines but spoken in the gentlest truth between two hearts that had finally found the courage to stay.